This episode of Crowdscene was recorded back when the show was called Kickstars. So every time you hear the words Kickstars, think Crowdscene. You can now find us at crowdsceneshow.com and also follow us on Twitter at crowdsceneshow. Thanks for listening.
Kickstars.
In this episode of Kickstars, we speak to writer and director Mark Lobatto, who shares how he developed and successfully crowdfunded his short film, Blue Borsalino.
There genuinely is no sitting back. Either you are successful, your campaign is running successfully, and then you're being fairly inundated with responses and questions, or you are fighting to get more people involved and reach out to new audiences.
Kickstars. Gonna kick it with Pete and Mike. Kickstars. Interviews behind the hype. Kickstars.
Hi there.
Hello.
Welcome to Kickstars, the show about successful crowdfunding campaigns and the people who make them happen. I'm Michael Ogden.
And I'm Peter Dean.
In each episode of Kickstars, we speak with people who have taken a risk by turning an idea of theirs into reality, by raising money on a crowdfunding platform. But what did it take to reach their goal? I like to hear the story behind the idea, understand where their concept came from, and learn what it meant to find success.
And I'm interested in how you design and run a successful campaign, as well as what our guests have learned along the way. We'll talk about some of the factors that can make or break a campaign.
So in this episode, we're talking with filmmaker Mark Lobatto, who we are very pleased to have here with us in the studio. We'll be hearing about his successful Kickstarter project to raise funds for his short film called Blue Borsalino.
So Mark set out to raise £10,000, that's about $15,000, to make the film on a shoestring budget. But by the end of the campaign, 341 backers had helped him more than double that to £23,000, which is $35,326.
You did the math.
Yeah.
So let's meet our guest. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you guys.
Thanks for joining us, and congratulations on your successful campaign.
Thank you very much.
So let's set the scene. For our listeners who aren't familiar with Blue Borsalino, how do you describe it to someone who hadn't heard it before?
So it's a short film project, a neo-noir film that's set between contemporary England and 1960s England. And it follows a retired private detective called Ernie Child, who gets a call, and it's from a nurse in a hospital. Somebody's woken up from his past, and it's his first and only client. And the two of them have to work out what happened on that one night many decades ago.
So you wrote, you directed, your brainchild. What is it about the story that personally resonates with you?
I think for me, there's undercurrents of I guess early in my career, and I've got a slight fear of or anxiety of making the wrong step. And I think writing an older character, looking back, whose whole life has been the result and have been informed of one bad incident, one moment, albeit maybe was or wasn't his fault, that's sort of dictated what the rest of his life became. And I think that sort of is where it came from, probably, is this idea of making your choices very carefully, and that sort of resonates with me. So I was kind of ready to embark on a meatier story, a broader, more transitional film that's between sort of the smaller vignette short films and something a bit more substantial. So this felt like a nice level.
This isn't your first film.
This is my second proper short film.
Okay.
So in a sea of short films that are being made and people are crowdfunding, how do you make yours stand out?
I think really you shouldn't try and make yours stand out. You should just try and tell a good story that you care enough to make. And I think as a filmmaker, you're also an audience member, and if it's something you want to see and you would enjoy yourself, then even if you think it might be a limited audience, you'll be surprised, because if it actually works on a human level, it probably is quite a broad audience story anyway. And so I think some people maybe get caught up on trying to do what's cool or what's sort of the zeitgeist of the moment or whatever, and they may be doing themselves a disservice. It's better to do something they actually care about.
So you mentioned it was a film noir. Just for the benefit of our listeners, could you just tell us what a film noir is?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult one to explain, because it's kind of an aesthetic rather than a sort of... In the past, basically, decades ago, there was these black and white films and they sort of these hard-boiled characters and sort of very frank dialogue, and it was about somebody who's seemingly a normal guy or woman who was sort of... life was unraveled due to a series of events. It's kind of that kind of dark, unnerving mystery behind a story that kind of drew me to this kind of
I once read with film noir that it kind of came out of World War II in America, and that it was to do a lot with identity, with the kind of post-war blues of, now that awful time is done, how do I fit back into society? Are those still the kind of themes that you're exploring with Blue Borsalino?
I think definitely identity and the reevaluation of one's identity after things have happened and a particular sort of bad event sort of overshadowing who you are now. Many years later, that was something I was drawn to. It's less specific to a time and place, of a certain era, which is, we're coming to it from a more modern angle, I guess. Hopefully, a sort of a slightly fresh take on the classic noir.
So you set out to write a film noir, or just the idea that you had just happened to fit into that genre?
No, I didn't set out to write one. I just ideas are funny things, and I kind of it starts with a small moment or a character, and it becomes a story that. And I was intending to make it a short film, not a feature length.
Okay.
I wanted it to be sort of under 30-minute short film, just so you could have a broad enough audience. You want to make a short film to be seen. It's not going to make revenue back. You just want to get it as broad an audience as possible, and hopefully it does everyone a favor in the process.
Short films can do a number of things for a filmmaker. You talk about some of those, the benefits of doing a short film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the most obvious one is that it becomes a calling card for a collaborative team to move on to bigger projects. So it can be a springboard. Sometimes people make short films that are literally a proof of concept for bigger things, or they can be small. Hopefully they work, in their own right anyway, and sort of bits of entertainment. But yeah, it can be anything from a 1 to 2 minute slice of life scene to, some festivals accept films up to 45 minutes long, so it's a huge variety of stuff. And the platforms, it's pretty broad, to be honest, of what people produce now.
Can you tell us, where did the name Blue Borsalino come from? Can you tell us what a Borsalino is?
It's a type of hat from the era. It's not too dissimilar from a fedora.
Right. Okay. So we had bets going on, Pete and I. I thought it was a type of pasta.
And I knew it was a type of pasta.
Fedora. You knew that?
Yeah, no, I didn't.
It was very well read. Yeah.
Okay, so the Blue Borsalino presumably plays a role in the movie.
It does. It does. Obviously, it's a hat that is worn by our main character, and I guess it's a tangible link, like other things, to his past.
Yeah.
And when he is to, face it for the first time.
I think it's a lovely name. It really trips off the tongue. It sounds, smooth and something cool about it.
Yeah. Have you ever considered changing your name to Mark Borsalino?
Now I am, yeah.
Because when I was writing up the show notes, I actually wrote down at some point, I was quite tired last night, and I wrote down Mark Borsalino.
Yeah.
I thought that sounded good.
Yeah. It's Mark Lobatto, just for the record. But we both, Pete and I, have called you at different times. Mark Borsalino's coming in on the studio. Mark Lobatto. Is this in any sense an autobiographical film?
No, not at all. Not at all.
You've never been a private detective?
Weirdly enough, no. I've never even experienced 1960. But
do you own a hat?
I own hats.
There we go. So it's a little bit of yourself in there.
Subtly.
Yeah. At the beginning of when you're sort of clawing for ideas, I was kind of drawn to an older, aging gentleman as the lead. And having not known either of my grandfathers, it felt like a kind of interesting thing to explore. But beyond that, there's nothing that sort of relates directly to my life anyway.
And out of all the ideas you have for stories, though, I mean, you're making notes regularly and daily. What's your process of deciding, this is the one to do next and this is the one to kickstart?
I guess they're two different things. I don't know. I mean, I think writing for me anyway is just is trying to write in the physicality of sitting down and getting stuff out there, and it's normally in retrospect, looking back at what you've written or produced over those few days, that or have an inkling if it's still with you and there's something that makes you want to surge ahead with it. Then that's the thing, and even then it might not come to anything. But and in terms of knowing it was the right thing to kickstart, I think short films are hard to fund, and my last short film was a lot more modest, and on the majority it was from my own pocket, and I couldn't afford to do it for this one. And yeah, so it felt right, and we thought about other avenues first, but crowdfunding and Kickstarter just felt like sort of the safe place for it. And had it not have worked, we would have looked for other ways to make it, because we wanted to make the film no matter what. It wasn't about it would just be a crowdfunding film. We wanted to make the project.
You made a film before, but what else have you been doing within the broader industry?
So I've kind of been knocking about on different levels of film sets since sort of school holidays, sort of when I was 15 or 16. I had an interest in it, and then I went to university. But since then,
how did that start? When you were 15 or 16, who gave you that sounds like an exciting summer job to me.
It sounds more exciting than it was, but it was tea making on sort of very small scale music videos and things like that. But at the time, my dad's an accountant. He has clients. He happened to have somebody that was doing something, and he knew I was interested. So that's how that happened. But yeah, I had an interest, as many people did, watching films through childhood, and it just felt like a natural progression. I went to university not studying that, just wanting to have a broader education, but the hunger to explore that industry was there, and I knew that's what I wanted to do afterwards.
I mean, what's that moment, though, where you kind of go from fan to someone who understands that people make these films and that you would want to be one of those?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it probably... You know what it is? It comes to a point where you watch a lot of films, and instead of just sort of dipping in, dipping out to lots of kind of things, you take an interest into one filmmaker or one genre or one type, and you see there's personality and there's an aesthetic and there's choices that are consistent through more than one, and I was just drawn to that. I mean, I like fine art, I like photography, I like painting, but this just felt like I was just really attracted to it. I don't know. It's maybe hard to put into words.
You mentioned your dad was an accountant or is an accountant, and was there your pursuit of a filmmaking career, was that a surprise to your family?
I think I've been talking about my interest in it for a long, long time, and I've got an older cousin who's now a writer represented sort of here in America, and he's doing well now, and so he's quite a few years ahead of me, and sort of to have somebody in a circle where that it's not completely infeasible to make that move, that definitely helped. So
it wasn't, Mark, you're insane, you need to go to become a lawyer.
It wasn't those words. There was definite general fear and anxiety towards, probably even now, to be honest. It's not like,
Well, you can be a creative accountant, right? You can. There's creativity.
Play with the numbers.
But I think if you're a creative accountant, you go to jail after a certain period of time. It depends on how creative you get.
Let's talk about crowdfunding. How familiar were you with crowdfunding before you had the idea of doing your own campaign?
Fairly aware. I'd known other people similar age to me that had done what I set out to do. Yeah. In a way, I mean, maybe I think it's more saturated now than it was when I was first aware of it. Yeah. And because of that, I think even more planning needs to go into it before you launch. Yeah. Because you're up against so many of the same sort. So
why did you choose Kickstarter as opposed to Indiegogo or even one of those other? I mean, there are crowdfunding platforms now like Seed and Spark, which are just for funding movies. Yeah.
Well, for me, Kickstarter is the one that's biggest in my mind. I'm most aware of it anyway. We wanted to go for a project that you couldn't just take whatever money you made. There was a larger sense of urgency of, you have to make your target or it's a failure. Yeah. Because I think it shows that for me anyway, it shows total commitment from your side that you have to make it, and therefore your hopeful backers might pick up on that, and within your window of time you're running it.
Is it because being a creative person, you can only get things done under pressure?
There's probably an element of that, definitely. I think, pressure does help,
it does
within its limits.
You need a deadline. Yeah.
So was there any other way you could have funded this movie, or was it really just crowdfunding or nothing?
I think it would have taken a lot longer, and it would have been piecemeal. We tried quite direct sort of government body avenues, which are there, they exist, but they're limited, and sometimes they lean towards certain kinds of stories or certain kind of established filmmakers, which is fine and within their right, and we gave it a go. But it just, crowdfunding just felt like the next right step for us. Really.
Did you need to convince anyone else on your team that crowdfunding was the way to go?
I needed to convince my producer that we could do it all through crowdfunding. Right. I think she was perhaps. I think unless you've run a more ambitious project on it, which I hadn't either, but it's hard to tell exactly what the kind of support and reaction is going to be, and which is quite rightly so. So yeah.
What was your pitch to her? What did you say?
I was just saying that, if you aim for a slightly lower target, you'll be surprised if you get the page right, and you update in the right way and you're engaged with your followers, there's no reason, especially with the team we were coming to the table and the sort of, we had a bit of experience, both her and myself, and we're within the filmmaking community, so there were doors we hadn't yet knocked on that we were going to for this. So it felt like we were coming from a fairly solid place, relatively.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as you're saying these words to her, you have some background worries.
Totally. Oh, the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Masses of fear. And especially, as we did and everyone does, you go through your personal closest routes before you go out wider looking for help. And by doing that, you're very vulnerable, really. Something creative like that with your name to it that would potentially publicly fail is actually a very daunting thing.
Yes,
indeed.
We had a guest mention that it almost can feel like you're either validated or just a rejection. It can feel like a personal rejection.
Totally. Yeah. Especially people. Not everybody understands crowdfunding as well, so they don't realize quite the quantity of people that don't hit their target, and those projects sometimes still get made in other ways.
Yeah.
But as you said, I think from the outside in, if you don't hit that target, a lot of people would consider it in a certain negative way, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I think you're also immediately vulnerable just by pursuing an artistic career or something that isn't instantly bankable.
I think people are cynical. I mean, I'm a cynical person by nature, and you have to be realistic that the odds are kind of against you a little bit unless you really do your homework and know what your project is inside out.
Given the great success of your campaign, are you a little less cynical?
I do think now that the right planning and knowing like the identity of your film or your product, and having the right amount of time before you launch, I think you can really have a good shot at it. I think most people can have a good shot at it.
Did you get any advice from anyone about how to create an effective campaign?
No, my advice was reading an awful lot of forums and website pages and beyond that, looking at a shed load of existing and past campaigns on Indiegogo and Kickstarter. What succeeded, which didn't, and why I liked them and why I didn't.
Was there any particular website or forum you found that really helped you?
There was one that was called Hack Kickstarter, a page on that, and it was very, very, very in depth with the research, which helped me a lot. Yeah. Not a lot of it was directly applicable to a film project, right. But I did spend time trying to understand all of it, and it was very kind of figure and technical heavy, and make it relatable to mine, and it was actually very useful. Yeah.
That sounds. Was it the Tim Ferriss thing? Yeah, he wrote this article, I think, called "How to Hack Kickstarter." Yeah. Yeah,
it was impressive.
Actually. A lot of people say the same thing.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what would have happened if you hadn't crowdfunded the film?
It's a good question. I would have either had to slightly compromise on the actual story itself and reel it in and make it work for less money and find that elsewhere. Or maybe even sideline the project and write one that was more feasible within a smaller budget again. So, yeah.
Well, talking of budget, your goal was £10,000.
Yeah.
Where did that figure come from?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I do think that we undervalued our eventual overall budget, which we're glad with how it came together in the end because of that reason. But we were always going to aim a fair bit less for what we wanted to hit, for the reason why if you don't make that, you get nothing back. So somebody I knew made a short film who needed £12,000, and their target was just under 10 or something. It just, for us anyway, it sat well and went for 10. At that point when we launched, we thought we can make this for about 15.5.
Okay.
In reality, we needed the money we made, basically. So
that seems to be a common tactic. Our past guests have told us the same thing. They always go for a lower figure, and then because it seems like an easier thing to achieve, so people aren't put off by making a contribution.
Is that and the clear side of it is that it's judged on kind of popularity and percentages, and the proportion that you make within a certain time within that 10 grand or whatever your target is. That's what's judged upon, and that's how it shifts if your page is featured or whatnot. So if you're aiming lower, then in theory, the backers you have now are actually worth more, proportion within your overall target. So it helps you.
You mentioned that the planning is key. How long was it between you deciding and convincing your team, let's go the crowdfunding route, to pressing go on the campaign?
I'd say around 2 months, maybe slightly longer.
Okay. So in those 2 months, or describe those steps you took within those 2 months to get
Sure.
ready.
The very first thing was rereading the script and really understanding what it was which helped me in the process of filmmaking anyway, but knowing exactly what it was, and because of that, who our hopeful audience would be, and trying to think about specific genres and indie filmmakers and indie film watchers, and where do they go online and where do they go physically, and try and work out the sort of online circles and groups they hang out in, and join them ourselves, and subscribe to newsletters and become contributors in those websites, so that when we do tap into them and ask them questions and get them interested, that it's not out the blue and it's not cold calling, basically.
So you did a little pre-campaign campaign by the sounds of things.
That came a little bit later. Yeah, no, but you're right. I mean, I just mean at the beginning, knowing exactly what Blue Borsalino was going to be, and then sort of making sort of concept art a reality, and knowing, having the main image and sort of the idea of style of headers and things like that came together as well.
So a lot of our guests say that it's quite important with a Kickstarter campaign or any crowdfunding campaign to bring your own audience. Don't expect just to find an audience on the platform. So did you have a big mailing list that you brought to this project?
Not huge, but I had a mailing list. I mean, I think list making is something that very early on that I did as well.
Yeah.
From the most personal to the obscure to formal work colleagues to people I thought was a long shot. And I put them in different brackets accordingly, and sort of had templates of the emails I was going to send out to them on day one, set out accordingly, and things like that. And the people who were closer to me, I made them aware of the project long before the launch, and those are the people, the small few that I'd get feedback off that I trusted on the actual page itself and the approach we were going to take.
Building that list, was there any tool that you used that was effective?
I mean, I did use MailChimp for some of it, but actually when it came to using the emails, I actually did them personally because I thought it was better, and I didn't want anything to come across like a newsletter. And even though it did take a lot more time, I kind of wrote off the weeks of the campaign itself as a full-time job anyway, because I think you need at least one person to be doing that.
It's that unmistakable personal Mark Lobatto touch.
Yes. Which seems to have paid off, because I believe you met your goal after 4 days, right?
That's right, yeah.
Which is pretty impressive.
Pretty speedy.
I did notice by looking at the rewards, you had the highest level of reward was £2,000, and you had 2 available spaces for that, and they both went.
That's correct. How much was that?
£2,000. So in dollars, that's what, Mike? 3,000. It's like $3,500.
$3,500.
Right?
I mean, that's substantial.
So I've got to ask, were either of those your parents?
Nope. Nope. My parents did put a little bit in, but anyone close to me or Annabelle, the producer, didn't actually select rewards. They just did it because you can choose to give money without taking up the rewards that other people can get.
Yes.
So yeah, it's surprising, but the higher end pledges are actually people we either didn't know or had rarely been in touch with for sort of several years. So it's amazing where charity comes from.
That must have been a great feeling,
I should say. Rather.
So what do you get for £2,000 as a backer?
You become an executive producer, which means your name was alongside our original executive producer, who is Christopher Smith, who's an established filmmaker, and also David Warner, the actor, became an executive producer. So your name's alongside those two.
Time Bandits.
Exactly, amongst many others.
Amongst many others. Yeah.
The
very talented David Warner.
So, and beyond all that, you get all the stuff prior to. So you get the the posters. You get to the screening. You come for a set visit. You have a sort of Skype Q&A with us if you want, if that's useful to you or anything like that.
So it must have been a great feeling to have people you didn't know pitching at the highest level.
Yeah, it was incredible. Strange almost, but it's an amazing stamp of people believing in the project.
Can I ask you for a second back to the list building in the forums, because I think for many people that's a real challenge. You can think of friends, family, maybe LinkedIn, and I'll Google a couple forums. Yeah. But how do you really dig into the forums and build your list that's going to hit your real target?
So I mean, this is based on things that I read outside of, it's not my own knowledge, but most useful is knowing who you're targeting is relevant, not just quantity, but relevant. I mean, you will do your broader list of people but it's by looking at previously successful film-related, specifically short film successful projects on Kickstarter. Google search the images and all this kind of stuff. Who were the people that did articles on them? Who were the people that helped publicize them? And by targeting them, or rather sort of making contact with them and finding a way to serve their readers, not ask them for help, but offer something that would interest their readers. That's the way in, and that and then it pays off, and then they'll happily, in theory, give you a mention or drop a little article, or even if it's just social media posts on the launch day or the first couple of days, and that makes a huge difference.
That's very smart. That's fantastic.
Good advice too.
So you're kind of following a trail of breadcrumbs.
Totally,
yeah. And then when you say giving them something, in some cases, I guess it's sharing advice or right. Yeah,
I mean, as in there might be a website who is all about low to no budget indie filmmaking, or just about kickstarting projects, or maybe they're interested in the writing side of it, or something specific to your crew that that you can offer, visuals, all kinds of stuff. So you just find a way to make it a mutually beneficial thing, basically. Yeah.
Before you started the campaign, I mean, so during those 2 months of time, was there anything that was a surprise to you, that was difficult to pull off, you didn't expect?
I think getting the page right takes a lot of time, or it should do. That kind of economy of words, and it forces you to really, really distill what your project is and know it inside out on a creative and thematical basis, and just be clear. It needs to read as if somebody that doesn't care about film, doesn't care about your project, is a general Kickstarter visitor, will turn up and scour their eyes down and visually understand what it is from your images, but also then if they go to the bullet points or the subsections and they've got it down, because not everyone will sit through the whole video. They'll often start and be scrolling as you're talking.
Let's just talk for a second about the video itself, because I thought that your video was very good, quite understated, and showed a lot of restraint, I suppose, for a filmmaker. It was just really you doing a sort of deliberately from into the camera. Quite British in some respects, very modest.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, I mean, from the successful campaigns that I'd watched, there is a variety of approaches, but the ones that the majority seemed to work were talking heads, being honest about where you come from and what you're trying to do, show enthusiasm and care and ability and what you're bringing to the table, and that's it. And the call to action at the end of hoping people will help make it happen. But you can do sort of these sort of semi sort of mock trailers at the beginning, but I find if it takes them too long to know who the face behind it is, and there needs to be a little bit of your story, not just this story.
I think people respond to meeting the person behind the campaign and your story.
I think crowdfunding is still on some level a personal thing, a personal interest, a personal investment. And albeit you're starting within your personal circles and that word of mouth goes out, but it does stem from the fact that somebody knows you, or somebody, initially at least. So,
So we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, we're going to hear what happened as Mark's campaign went live.
If you'd like to be a guest on Kickstars and share your story of crowdfunding success, then write to us by email at hello@kickstars.net with your name and a link to your campaign page. Thanks. And we're speaking with Mark Lobatto, who's in the studio with us here at Kickstars, and we're talking about his very successful campaign to raise funds for his short film, Blue Borsalino. So put us in the room. Describe that feeling before you press that button to go live. What are the stakes? What are you thinking?
Yeah, terrified. Meticulously planned, but terrified. I had kind of a strategic written up thing lined up, and then for the first day, sort of a minute by minute kind of thing of what I needed to do. Partially went out the window when certain emails just took longer to get out. 1 day's worth of emails became almost 4 days worth of emails, because I think, take the time and make them personal. Otherwise, people pick up on that. People get 100 emails a day sometimes. But day one was very daunting. And
are you at your house?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Relatively comfortable.
What did you choose a particular day or a particular time to go live?
We went live, I think it was 7:35 in the morning. So the way we saw it was either you can, when you launch is basically when you finish. So either you aim for it to make the most impact at the beginning or the end, and we wanted the beginning to be the biggest surge, and we picked midweek day, which we hope was also quite decent for response, and that time just gave people a little while to get into the office midweek. Maybe they're a bit bored, having a look around, that kind of thing. Links come to them, then they have a little browse.
So you woke up early. Did you sleep well the night before?
I did not. No. No.
What was going through your mind?
What I needed to do, the worry. I mean, for me, it's a question of sort of benchmarks to get through. You know, the first of which was to make day one the most impactful as possible, and by lining up online articles that were going to be released on that day and the first couple of days, that put my mind at slight rest. But I had no idea of what kind of initial impact it was going to do. But so for me, a big thing, and one of my tips really, is to the first few hours, really, if there's going to be any guaranteed backers and money coming in, do it sort of instantly, so that it looks like you're really skyrocketing for the popularity in terms of Kickstarter or the people who run the platform.
And you did that by getting people to promise you'll be there for that day.
I mean, you know, even if it's not a lot of money, people who have said to you, yeah, of course I'll back this, I'll do what I can, or whatever. Well, if you are going to do that, can you please do it 10 minutes past this hour, because
that fast.
Literally like that. Yeah, absolutely.
So how did the first day go?
It went really well. Within the first hour, I got an email saying we're in the new and noteworthy section of Kickstarter. Within the first 3 hours, we were a staff pick, which is something that means a lot more eyes go onto your project.
What do you attribute that to?
Getting those initial people in, because the emails that you send out, it takes a little while for people to get back. I didn't launch on social media until a few hours after the actual launch itself, because I wanted the majority of people that I know to look at it and see several percent already achieved, as opposed to a zero, which I think matters.
So you were literally emailing people saying, please go onto the campaign at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock and make your pledge there.
I was. And prior to that, I reached out to my crew and my sort of closest, maybe 10 people, and given them templates to spread out to their circles and their working communities, et cetera, to get the network as broad as possible.
You mentioned getting some online press. Was that from you contacting them saying, here's I've written an article for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was from those email contacts a week prior, maybe a little bit, maybe 2 weeks before, offering what we've got these high-res images. This is what we're about, and this was before we had any cast attached at all. We kind of anticipated having more people or some attached during the campaign. We didn't have any actually, even towards the whole campaign went, and we didn't have any cast on board, which was even better that we managed to achieve what we did. But the idea was that we'd get our lead actor within the first week or first 2 weeks, and then we'd have a new kind of audience interested, their existing fan base.
Was there a pressing deadline for you to go live at a particular, that time of the year? I mean, why go then?
We wanted to go after Christmas time because everyone's spending a lot of money. So we waited till kind of Christmas holidays were done, and then it was and then January came and we realized we had a few more tweaks to make to our campaign, and the video took a little bit longer to organize getting it shot. So it's just logistical things, really.
So you waited until that time where everyone had no money left.
Absolutely.
After Christmas.
Christmas, yeah.
Well, no, it was more or less, it was... When
no, I was just kidding.
I think we were kind of like mid-February.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, the end of February paycheck came about halfway through our campaign. All that kind of stuff.
I see.
But that actually does matter.
So once you reached out to everyone you knew, you'd built a really strong foundation for the project, you reached your goal within 4 days. What did you do then? Did you sit back and think, well, this is great, or did you then actively try and go much further?
There genuinely is no sitting back. Either you are successful, or rather your campaign is running successfully, and then you're being fairly inundated with responses and questions and things you need to update and send out, or you are fighting to get more people involved and reach out to new audiences. So there's no waiting around, especially... Really, it was myself and my producer. My producer has a daytime job anyway. I didn't during this period, so it was mostly me doing the majority of the campaign legwork. So if I wasn't doing it, nobody was. And I think even if you're doing well at the beginning, and even if you just have to chase it, you have to be busy the whole time.
Yeah.
Even thinking of everything from old school and university alumni groups to like local radios, which we didn't actually do in the end, but or anything really.
What kind of press and interviews did you do during the campaign?
A lot of them were kind of indie filmmaking groups that had an interest in sort of emerging filmmakers. Really, it was that kind of audience.
And have you found that you've your mailing list, your own kind of audience, has grown as a result of doing the Kickstarter campaign?
Yeah, I think so. Out of the 340 odd people that backed us, I'm a big chunk of that, way over a third of that were people that we've never met. In fact, about 35% of those people were direct from Kickstarter. People were just visiting that website.
Yeah.
And I think I attribute a lot of that to do with the surge of day one and day two, really. Getting it. And eventually we became project of the day, which you can get listed as
that's right.
sort of 4 days in. So that was really helpful as well.
Did you have goals for each week of saying, okay, this week I'm going to hit this audience? Or
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to start local and then work out and then see if there's any sort of new avenues opened up because of that process. And sometimes people took a long time to get to their work emails. They couldn't help, but they put me in touch with somebody else, or somebody else had an interest. So yeah, it was. You can plan as much as you can, but sometimes you kind of it's quite an organic thing when you're actually in the campaign.
Did anything surprise you about the campaign?
Yeah, definitely. For the most charitable people are sometimes people you barely know. Sometimes people you do know, you're slightly disappointed with or maybe their understanding of what the project means to you or the Kickstarter platform does.
Yeah.
Surprising. Yeah, I mean, the general positive support was great. We could never have foreseen it. And
what would you say to your friends when you're trying to describe what this project meant to you?
My friends knew because I am what I am, and I think as somebody who is trying to be a filmmaker, the only way to make that move is to actually have your own content. And this was my next one, which was important to me and the group. And I think from the page, like, the heads of departments that joined us at the beginning and during, have a great, back history themselves with their work, and they had an interest in this. So that kind of commitment from people with experience, definitely.
Well, to get such a talented crew of people that you did, what did you say to them to get them on your team?
Some of them were people that were either friends or on my radar already, but those I didn't. It was generally looking, while the campaign was running, it was sort of going to forums and websites and seeing who was interested, and the page did a lot of the talking, to be honest. And some people actually just came to us based on the Kickstarter campaign. That happens quite a lot.
They would say, I see you're doing this campaign and you're going to need an editor. Or
Absolutely. That's still going on now. Yeah, we still get sort of sound composers and compositors and things if there's any of this going on.
So you crowdfunded this film in more ways than one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Was that expected?
Yeah.
That no, it wasn't. No, that was unexpected. And there's some talented people out there that it means you get to have contact with, which is brilliant.
So it sounds like you were really busy all the way through, but did you find it stressful setting up or running the campaign?
Yeah, it was stressful the whole way through.
Yeah.
From the beginning to the end, and even at the end, there's an element of stress because you want to make a great film and tell us the story you wanted to tell in this case, but beyond that, you then have to come through and make sure they get their rewards, and for me, I wanted to make sure they feel like they're getting their money's worth anyway, even if they put in £1. So it was really important for me to update every day. We were updating something, sometimes twice a day, which I think is a big difference between what we did and what a lot of people do.
That is
important,
very often, but it does make a difference. If you've backed it, then you're interested.
Yeah, I mean, some people who I didn't know that well were saying it was like having an e-magazine sent to them every day, because there's a new article every day, even if it was something brief, even if it was like, this is another short film that we think is cool,
yeah, right.
Or this guy's just joined our team, or check out these new visual references.
Yeah.
Something every day coming into your inbox is involving, and people really responded well to that and spread the word accordingly.
How much of that did you plan in advance? Because I some of those things you just mentioned, perhaps you could just run us through some of those things. I thought it was very clever the way you structured those messages.
So that was 80% planned in advance. I wanted it to be 100% planned in advance, but some things that I thought I'd have by those days I didn't have, and therefore had to quickly think of something to do.
Yep.
So yeah, I had a spreadsheet of day one all the way down to the final day of what I ideally would be posting as an update to people, what stages we might be at, going more in depth about this department, in a visual way to engage people, because, you don't want to be that in depth on your main page because there's only so much stuff people want to troll through.
So you were actually educating people about the filmmaking process and the kind of film you were making. Yeah,
very much. There was that, and then generally, I did a few just me talking to camera videos about what we've been up to, that wasn't evident on the page. Maybe we've been visiting locations, or been into this cool prop house and found these great props for this. So anything like that made them aware of what our day to day was like, not just sending out emails for the Kickstarter campaign.
Well, I guess it's also doing a couple things, which is it's reinforcing to your audience how much you care about the project, and at the same time, people find that behind the scenes of particularly filmmaking is a fascinating process, and you're kind of getting that insider, knowledge. And
I think some people can be slightly lazy, or if they see that a project is doing fairly well, they might be like, well, he probably doesn't need my support. Look, he's already getting this. But if everybody thought that, you wouldn't hit your target, or you wouldn't hit your stretch target. So by having these updates, there's just extending the interest beyond the initial page, basically.
Yeah.
One thing that happens if you are interested in making things, you often see the great icons who are mega successful and think there's no way that I could possibly get there. Whereas crowdfunding platforms offer a venue for people who are more your peers and seeing some success and going, actually, I'm not Stanley Kubrick right now, or the Coen brothers, or whoever it might be, but people are taking steps along the way. I mean, for me, that's a very powerful thing, because I know that I think when people look at the icons of creative icons, and you think, I'll never do it, I'll never get there, so therefore I won't take any steps to go there.
It bridges the gap, basically.
Yeah, I
think there's an element of that, definitely. Some people have a much greater understanding of how the filmmaking world works than others, but I think there's more of a transparency now for filmmakers, and they understand that it happens slightly later in your career than in other industries, and that it takes a lot of work and a bit of luck and hard work and opportunities. But for short films in particular, there's not that many funding bodies out there, and if there are ways to get behind emerging filmmaker, then for some people that's interesting and something they can get behind.
So right before we're going to talk about the film in just a second, but right before we do, just tell us what the last day of the campaign was like.
Yes, so I remember I stayed up all night for the final 11, 12 hours because we started at 7:30 in the morning. I had to finish at 7:30 in the morning.
Oh, I see.
So I decided I'll stay up,
Wow.
Why not? Because there are people in different time zones that were up, and it ended up being great. There were people that were sort of, commenting through Facebook or Twitter or sending emails still. And in the end, actually, there was one or two fairly substantial pledges who ended up backing even more because of conversations we had on that night. So,
so definitely
happy to have done it.
Staying up late on the last night. Good tip. So how did you celebrate? By going to sleep, or
basically? Yeah,
some celebration.
No, I'm not really one to do that. I mean, we were really happy, obviously, but then it's sort of from one hat to the next, and it's kind of, well, what do we have to do now to make this happen? And what things haven't we yet achieved in pre-production to get this made? And
how many weeks did you have between the campaign ending and you're on the set?
I think it was about 5 weeks. And we had a lot to do. So I had a lot of casting sessions, visiting the more prop houses and sorting out the art direction more concretely. All the logistical stuff that goes with it, and securing locations. One had to be changed and tweaked, and all the scheduling, and getting a couple of the key crew, like the first assistant director on board. So yeah, it was again a very busy period.
Was there then a sense that I pulled the campaign off, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this film?
I think the challenge was we were so happy with the final budget, or rather what we raised. But then through the technical recce and what actually happens practically with the filmmaking process just before you film, is you realise that there are certain things that need need more, need this to make it happen and to make it exactly how you want it to.
Have you finished shooting the film now?
Yeah, all the shooting's finished as of last week, and now we're in early stages of editing, and then all the other post stuff kicks off pretty soon. Yeah,
it's quite something to kind of think that you're kind of out of the frying pan of the Kickstarter campaign, and then you're into the fire of making the film or shooting the film, and now then you're going to post-production. And I mean, what is that moment that you foresee? Can you describe that moment where all of this chapter of your life is done?
Yeah.
What do you do that day?
Yeah, I guess that day might be the first acceptance officially into a film festival that we wanted to get into, because then it's completed. The marketing for that film has been successful. They get what we're about, and it can be shown somewhere outside of our initial audience. That'd be great. And presumably, I'll be working on another job by then anyway, because the festival circuit can be sort of 14-month period or something.
Yeah.
So it's a long time. You can't just twiddle your thumbs while you're waiting for that to happen.
So how do you plan on getting the film out there? How do you plan on getting it seen, other than the tidal wave of publicity that'll follow this show?
Yeah. Being on Kickstarter.
This is it, right? Yeah. So we'll have a private screening, and we'll try and invite people that may or may not be interested in coming outside of the people that we, our cast and crew and the backers who want to be there will come to that. And then, it's the long-term sending off and hopefully acceptance into film festivals. And then off the back of that, if you can get any kind of distribution down some channels, TV channels, some airlines show short films. There's other avenues as well, obviously on demand, online.
What's the most personal line in the film for you?
Maybe it's time to wake up now. Yeah. I'll leave that one hanging there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take one last short break now. And when we come back, we're going to be hearing what advice you have for our listeners about crowdfunding.
We'll be back with more Mark Lobatto in just a second. We want to let you know we've got some great guests coming up on Kickstars, including Thane Richard, the COO of Outernet, the new company with an incredible mission to broadcast the most important content of the web to the 2/3 of the world, or 4.3 billion people who do not have access to the internet. If their ambitions are met, Outernet will be a household name in 5 years. The team successfully crowdfunded on Indiegogo, and you can hear how they did it on the next episode of Kickstars.
Hi, I'm Thane Richard, COO of Outernet. Did you know that right now, 6 out of every 10 people on Earth do not have access to the internet? We did a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo to try and solve that problem with a device that receives free data from space. You can hear our story on an upcoming episode of Kickstars. Follow them on Twitter at KickstarsShow, all one word, to hear when our episode goes live.
So be sure and subscribe for that episode and more on iTunes or any of your favorite podcast apps.
So, Mark, you've run a really successful campaign. You clearly know how to get the most out of crowdfunding. So what advice do you have for our listeners who want to start their own campaign? Can you give us your top tips for crowdfunding success?
Absolutely. First thing is to really spend the time researching other successful campaigns that relate to your future one. Find exactly what you love about those. Might be the way they talk on their video, the way they've got the headers in their page, how they've done their outreach work to other websites, and then try and find a way to make it relevant to the identity of your project, because you need to have a distinct identity basically if you can.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. So when you're up and running and you have backers and they're responding with feedback and saying they've enjoyed an update, really you want to be getting in touch with those backers again and saying, hey, this is a template email. If you're happy to and you're enjoying the experience, why don't you spread the word within your community of people? Because those are people that already care. They put their money where their mouth is, so they're going to help you out.
Can I ask you, with that template email, is it just like a paragraph, or is it a page? What kind of detail is it?
So it would be different depending on what kind of email it is, but it'd just be like, hey, so I've put money behind this project. I think it's great. Check it out. Here's a link. They've already achieved this or something, or they've got this going on. And I guess something personal between them and that person, and yeah. It's got short, succinct.
Yep.
Occasionally we put our poster at the bottom of it, like as a banner, so it looks kind of professional without being sort of loads of stuff like a newsletter. But that was useful. Yeah, and an obvious one is just the absolute importance of the first few days. And for me, I almost approached day one as, let's see if we can get everything on day one. You know, it was obviously going to be impossible, but if you aim toward people being aware that you're launching on that day, so they're anticipating it, be that your friends and relevant websites, amazing. And also that is, hopefully you might get like a surround sound effect of, oh, this is an article from this person, or we've just really positively, we just pushed past this target, this hurdle, this is how many backers we've got. And that momentum of day one is everything, really, I think.
In that, for day one, are you also thinking number of backers as opposed to just the money that's been raised?
I think in terms, I'm not sure exactly how the statistics and numbers work with Kickstarter, but I think backer numbers shows an increase of popularity in a different way to just the money coming in. So yeah, I think it's useful.
I love what you said on the campaign video, which was, even if you don't have any money, but it's a big help just to share it. I thought that sometimes people don't mention that, and that was powerful. It also, I think, in a way that showed some of you, which was that, look, I really want to make this, and if you don't have money, that's okay. Yeah. But I just need you to spread the word. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, because that then might lead to other people in their network putting money in, but beyond that, it becomes an eventual audience and people that are engaged in the story we're trying to tell, and that's another cool thing you get out of Kickstarter.
I think that's a great tip. But just to recap your 3 top tips here, we've got number 1, research other relevant campaigns, follow what they did, but all with your own identity. Number 2, give your backers the tools to help them spread the word. I thought your example of giving them an email template was really clever and really simple too. Number 3, really go for broke on the first day, create a buzz early and get a lot of momentum.
That's right, yeah.
I think they're 3 excellent tips. If
there was a prize for excellent tips, we'd give you that prize. Can I ask you...
there is no prize.
There is no prize.
What?
There's not even a t-shirt. If you get asked by someone who wants to make a first film and haven't yet made a first film, is there advice that you give them?
If it's a first film and they don't have any money, maybe start with some kind of resources that they already do have. So something like a single interesting looking location before you even write the short, or project. That being the hook, to base it around. Then you're not having to lay out money for council fees and rental hire. You can park for free there, or the little things that you think won't add up really do and set you back. So if you can do almost like a stage play in a short film in a cool location, then you're set up. Really.
That's smart advice. I noticed that on your for Blue Borsalino, one of the big costs in terms of your budget was locations.
Yeah, definitely.
So we have a brand new section of the show now, which is the Mailbag section. We have some questions from, I think they came through Twitter. So Mike,
that's right. Okay. Yeah. A couple of questions from Unique Forms, unique_forms. From Matt Smith. He is currently in a Kickstarter campaign. He is £1,000 short of his goal. He's got 14 days to go. He's still over 70% though in terms of what he wants to raise. What's the one thing you can recommend that he does right now to get him over the line?
It sounds like he's doing really well, and he's probably just having the slight anxiety of the mid-campaign slump, assuming he's doing like a 30-day or something.
Yeah.
So that sounds really promising. It depends how regularly and how interesting his updates are. For me, I would say put real attention into making sure every day you've got something interesting or cool to show, to engage new people, and try and explore new social media platforms. Like for me, I wasn't aware of really Google Plus groups, and I had to, introduce myself into that. And, I did a kind of like a live broadcast thing through one group there, and that was really helpful.
So before we wrap up, it's time for another segment of the show called Guest Picks. This is where our guest tells us about another crowdfunding campaign, anything at all, any platform, past or present, that they think is cool. So Mark, what have you got for us here?
So yeah, I had to think about this, and it's just a constant flux of great stuff going on. One is a film project, a documentary project called Plant Pure Nation, and it's all about getting awareness out for good eating really around America, sort of starting from the source and kind of what the food companies and nutritionists in America kind of concealing from the American people, and I just found it fascinating. And they're doing really well, but they've still got, I think, just under 2 weeks to go.
Fantastic.
So it's kind of a expose.
I think so, and they've made the film already, I should say, and it's doing very well in terms of reception. But what they want is to have it a broad audience around,
I see.
and have loads of cinema showings around the country. So obviously, it's a hard sell for some distributors, and I'm all for kind of documentaries that shine light and bring you awareness to kind of injustices and things like that. And there's actually quite a lot of those on Kickstarter. They're really good.
Yeah.
Another Harvard.
Yeah. Okay, so look, before we go, Mark, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to talk about?
The only thing to say is that my producer and I have decided to try to help out other people, and I've put a document together and do a little Skype session with them for like half an hour. That we're now doing a service for people, if that's helpful. To anyone who's interested.
Crowdfunding?
For crowdfunding. Well, film specific, but crowdfunding, just because a lot of people have sent emails, and often they have more questions than we can answer in an email, and we want to kind of help out. And
what's next for you? Do you think about features, or do you think next short films, or?
I do think about features, yeah. Ideally, the plan is the next kind of dramatic piece for me would be a feature film. But in the meantime, I put my sort of other working hat on, and I'll be doing other work as a PA for feature film directors on sort of major pictures, which is what I tend to do to sort of stay afloat and learn throughout as well. But yeah, no, I write and am developing feature films, and hopefully will anticipate some meetings. And I would love to sort of talk to agents and things and see if I can find other ways to work towards the debut feature. That's the idea.
And the possibility of crowdfunding that feature is an option.
You know what? I don't rule it out, but I think it's more likely that it would maybe play a part in either as like a finishing fund or development fund, as opposed to it in its entirety. I think it's very, very rare that can work out. Have to be realistic.
Mark, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. A big thanks to Mark Lobatto, and we wish you lots of success and continued success and getting the word out on Blue Borsalino, your short film. Thank you for sharing your insights today.
Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you. It's been great having you on. Would you mind just to remind us where people can go online and find out more about you and about Blue Borsalino?
No worries. So Facebook/Blue Borsalino or at Blue Borsalino on Twitter.
Cool.
Can I ask you, before you go, is there a quote that you have stuck on your wall, something that keeps you rolling, kind of words to live by that you can leave our audience with?
Sure. There's one by Thomas Jefferson I quite like. If you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done.
Like it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's good. Thomas Jefferson said that?
Apparently so.
Everyone loves a bit of Thomas Jefferson.
He's so underrated. Smart guy.
Yeah, Mark, thank you for being a fabulous guest here on Kickstars, and we wish you all the best as you finish off the film and unleash it on the world.
Thanks very much. Cheers. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. You've been listening to Kickstars, the show about successful crowdfunding campaigns and the people who make them happen. A big thank you once again to our guest, Mark Lobatto, for his time and insights in this episode. To find out more about his film, visit facebook.com/Blue Borsalino. And if you'd like to find out about upcoming guests on this show, why not join our mailing list at kickstars.net.
If you'd like to be a guest on Kickstars and share your story of crowdfunding success, then write to us by email at hello@kickstars.net with your name and a link to your campaign page. Our thanks to the very talented songwriter Kim Bookbinder for the Kickstars theme music. For more on Kim, do check out kimbookbinder.com. Thanks for listening.
Kickstars, gonna kick it with Pete and Mike. Kickstars, interviews behind the hype. Kickstars, Kickstars. What do you do? What do you say to make crowdfunding go your way? Kickstars, Kickstars. Kickstars, Kickstars, Kickstars. Your shake brings all the backers to the yard.
Now that's what I call epic.